A poo poo. All right, so where am I? Okay, well, good morning, everyone. How are you? Well, normally I would be over on Jeff's channel, but I think he may be having internet issues. So you get a bonus feature. Well, good morning to you. Happy Sunday. Hope everything is going good in your day. I am here relaxed, enjoying another spectacular sunrise. Um, don't know what it is like in your part of the country, but here we have had just spectacular sunsets. And I mean, last night's was really, really odd. In fact, I took some pictures um, because the reason why I was out there was because of all the fighter aircraft that were going over. The first three that went over, they were flying low to the deck, and it literally was shaking the ground as you could hear it. And then they kicked in those afterburners, and um, then 20 minutes later, another three come over, and while all this was going on, the sunset had some of the strangest colors. And I'll tell you what I will do. Let me pull this up for you so you can actually see what I was talking about. So just give me 1 second and I will get this pulled up. Uh, so this is what they call in fill in time. You know, you're supposed to be coming in and have like 1,000 questions or something as I pull up these spectacular shots. So now let me get back over here. I am now live. It was an illusion before that. It was the digital virtual me. All right, here we go. So this is what the sunset was looking like last night here from my backyard. And they were just, uh, that was not supposed to be in there, but that's a bonus. So, what was interesting about last night's video was these clouds, and you could actually watch them. These are winds that are really up there interacting with the lower type winds, which happens here because we live next to mountains. So that's what I was really taken aback. And then in this color here, um, I don't know what you would call that. It was kind of a, I don't know, pale green. Again, you can see the wave action of these clouds. Now, as I was taking pictures of that, here come the next set of three fighters. And I'm clicking off, and I said, well, all right, everybody else should be able to hear this. So check this out. Here, excuse me. All right, here we go. That's what I said. Holy cow. And look at the colors behind here. You see what I mean by the wave action? Now, how would you like to have that been going over your house? Not once, not twice, but thrice. Yeah. Okay. So, and as you can see, more of the fabulous colors, but it was really kind of a sickly color. I mean, we sometimes can really get just spectacular. Well, just go look at my archives. That's what I started this channel on because it was part of the process of this ever evolving awakening. I'm checking to see if Jeff at any time will be. Haven't heard anything. So, all right. There we go. So let me stop the share with that. And let me, I don't even know how many people are here. I didn't announce this. So there may be no one here. What? My goodness. What happened? Someone open up the door? Well, good morning to everybody. How is ya? Good morning, Liv. How are you? Wow, I did not expect this. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, anyway, had this thought this morning and oh, wanted to read you. I occasionally write poetry and I was emailing with Davy, um, my good friend over in Scotland, I believe. Is that right, Davy? Glasgow? Yep. Looks like a beautiful city. I'd love to visit there. And he wrote to me about how the days there are pretty gray, cloudy, gloomy. Every time I think about that, I think about Dean Koontz. Dean Koontz was one of the best writers, the way that he could always set the scene, you know? Um, the sky was a still, cold, you know, gray. You know, you're going, okay, I'm feeling it now. Um, yeah, there was a time I think I read every one of his books. Another really freaky book is Carrying Comfort, but I digress. So I'll read y'all a poem that I wrote. When he wrote me that, it immediately evoked a thought. So here it goes. All the whispers of winter once again come knocking upon my door. All of nature has prepared to bestow the crown of which she adores. My thoughts from inward speak out to greet an old friend yet again. With delight I await the first covering of white, a white no doubt like no other, so fragile that a breath will scare away. And though the sun be kept out, yet a warmth not from above, but a light that warms from within. O winter, a time like no other season, for it demands quietness, and it bears all to who they truly are and yet to be. So I welcome this faithful friend, for a season of thought shall yet reign again. All right, there you go. All right. No critics out there. If you're going to criticize, you have to submit your own poem. All right? And I'll read it on a live show. So, there you go. You can be inspired, folks, to do the things that, you know, you never thought possible. And I can tell you one of the great things about I don't know if getting old is the right phrase. We're going to talk a lot more for the rest of the show on what I talked about on Friday because I believe that this is so vitally important to every one of you. And if I could, I would grasp your hand and look you into your soul and say, you really need to grasp this. Because when it starts to really sink in, many of you who I am sure are like myself, people don't understand us. They think that somehow we're not spiritual, or they get the opposite interpretation that somehow being spiritual is somehow akin to a diminished term called New Agers, you know, or how about this one? Paganism. And, you know, I don't think any of us can really, how shall I say, alter the course that our destinies, each one of us, are on. I just, now, by saying that, it would lend credence to the fact, well, then predestination has a role in every person's life journey. Well, predestination in the sense that I think that there's an ultimate end we all are striving to achieve. But a lot of what we think today is just wrong. It's been an error. There is no religion today, none, in my humbled opinion, that can stand up to the questions now. Every religion will prove to be false. Every God will be proven to be false. Because here's my point. I have been searching for myself something that's more tangible than intangible. When I worked in the video post-production industry, the most interesting thing was we used to talk about in our sales and marketing meetings is that we sold nothing. We sold air. Now, we had the equipment that could do the manipulation of the video and the film, but in essence, I was out there to get, to do projects, whether it was industrial video or whether it was broadcast video. So I can clearly relate to intangibleness. I know what that means. And in much of the same way, all of us today are very much akin and tied to intangibleness. The fact that you can see my image and I can see your words. Now, the day that they'll actually get it to where we can, you can have video streaming, although I think that might get a little crazy. Um, yeah. So it's basically taking imagery and then materializing it into a form and dimension that we recognize. So that's what intangibleness means to me. So, having stated that, I have always been looking for something more than what I was told was gospel truth. And the heck of the thing about it is that it's anything but truth. And that's what really bothered me. I figured, probably like you have, if you figured this, if the average devotee spent 1 hour a day devoted to his or her particular belief and just count up the days. So let's just say you've been faithful follower of your belief for 10 years. Okay, so that's pretty cool. You know, you've got, you figure 3,500 hours, right? For every decade. Now, if you attend church, all the rest of that, you add that to it, and you could see very quickly where how the average layman could begin within a decade, dedicate about 10,000 hours or more to their particular belief system. So break that down, and then you can begin to see how many days you actually spent worshiping your idea of God. Because I'm going to show you something. So, as my journey began, and when I began to find out, for instance, the Gospel of Mark was never written by anyone called Mark. The fact that when I began to discover that the beginning of what I was dedicated to, of the New Testament, was actually written near the end. And anyway, so as you begin to knock these, I don't know what you would call them, illusions. It's the only thing I know. It's an illusion. And this is something that has puzzled our species for a long time. And so for years, I've searched, I've read. Um, if there was anything that I could get my hands a hold of that was not in any way contaminated by a presupposed objective, I read it, I studied it. And along this process, things were happening in the world that I wasn't aware of. All of us are seeing this same thing. And my whole point to this is that when we, as a species, the Homo sapiens, humanity, mankind, drew back into our past, and for the first time, we have something that is real, tangible, authentic. Now, we're still deciphering this language, but in the last 110 years, they first were discovered in the late 1800s. So we now have about 160 years from their first discovery. We are now into probably what I would really call the ramp up of fully understanding this wonderful, advanced, sophisticated culture. And no matter what your beliefs are, I'm just telling you about myself. I have found a peace because for once, I can now go to the museums. If you live in Philadelphia, go to the museum in Philadelphia. You'll see these tablets. Go. I mean, if there's one thing that you ever want to do, go. Look at them. You see, all the deceivers that jacked with our minds, the mind coitus, for thousands of years, folks, never, ever thought that these tablets would be discovered. None. If they had, they would have never written the Christian religion. Would have never, how should we say, deceptively elevated a culture of people beyond what they were, and they were tribal nomadics at best, settlers, because they learned from these people. And here's the thing you're going to have to reconcile with yourself. This is written record. Predates your Bible, predates your Hebrew God, predates your fake Jesus, predates your all the different religions. It predates them all. They can't stand up to this. Because if those gods or God had existed, they would have wrote about it. They didn't. No record. And you can't argue with me and say, Wayne, your argument is illogical. Because I would counter to you, show me something that's older. Show me something that is complete of a record as this. You can't. It doesn't exist. This is where every God came from. Now, I have to tell you, um, this is an awakening experience for me because this is history. They haven't had the time to screw with this. They couldn't corrupt it. They didn't understand it. They didn't know it existed. And when you look at what their monuments, older than the pyramids, older than the Sphinx, it all originates from Sumer. Now, the problem has been with this. You had this guy, and I know I talked about this on Friday night, but folks, this is important. At least it is for me. And this is a documentary of my journey, my awakening. So therefore, I get to drive the bus. But here, this guy did more damage than anything I have seen. It has started a cult following. I mean, my goodness. It's such a mind coitus. And I'm stating for the record, this man's interpretation stinks. It would be in a chemist terminology impure. He didn't know what he was talking about. He picked and chose certain one lines that, folks, you're reading one man's vision. So let's get back to how this impacts us all. So let's talk about God. It's Sunday. Well, you see, I could never figure out that even in the pantheon of Christianity, how they kept on wanting to say it was monotheistic in its application, but polytheistic in its origination. Couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand once I really got away because I was a Bible scholar. I mean, this is what I did. I spent a fortune on the books of that religion, spent a fortune financially giving into that, but I believed it. But the problem was my mind always knew there was something wrong here. Now, it took me 40 years to figure that out. But nevertheless, when I did, I said, so what's the answer here? What is the purpose of all of us? If you don't have a religion, you're kind of basically free forming it. You know what I mean? You really are. Because you ain't got no safety net. So this causes you to search. I mean, what was it that I heard David Cassidy's last words were? His daughter said, so much wasted time. Wow. You know, when a dead man utters those words, and he was in that transition point, meeting the definition, so much wasted time. I don't want that to be my epitaph. And when my time does come, and it will, as yours will, then I want to have at least some sort of something that hasn't been manipulated. And so when I read what the Sumerians believed, basically, let me pull up, let me see, let me stop into the chat room and see how everyone is doing. 136. Well, hi, folks. So let's get good. I am so, it's an honor to have you people in here because I think this is the type of conversation we all need to be having with ourselves. So I want to just go And that's what I'm doing right now, as he says. So I woke up this morning with the theme song of Hawaii Five-O. Dun, 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 dun. My wife says, she says, "Hun, your mind is a beautiful place." All right, so let's just talk a little bit about this, folks. We got to get serious about this. These monuments, these ziggurats, these pyramids, folks, they were the beginning. We get all Twitter-pated because of the pyramids in Giza. Now, this is the ones we need to think about. Now, this is Nippur. Now, the reason why I'm stopping on this is that because this was the city of the gods. This is where Enlil was cast out. And the whole story with him, with Namnil, he had raped her. And when the other gods, there's get this. So was one god, An, or Anu. We're going to look at that. Then there were the 7, and then there were the 50, and then there were beyond on that. Nothing that's on the planet doesn't have a god over it. Now, the Semitics took the same principle. From the time Sumer was invaded by the Akkadians, and the Akkadians adapted their alphabet, their language, their writing, because that's what made the citizens of Sumer so valuable to the opposing kingdoms, was that they knew how to write. They knew how to write and put down thought. That's huge. You didn't pass it from generation to generation by speaking it. You actually had a written record. So Nippur here became eventually Nimma's reign, Mother Earth, and we'll see the other cities where Enki lives. So this is like really a big deal when you begin to see how these people. So I want to stop here. So this is the city of Ur. This is where the Semitic Abraham comes from. They leave a lot out of the story. A lot. This was Eridu. This was where Enlil had his kingdom. Uruk was another one. All of these, Nina, Lagash, you'll see all of these cities. Saipor was another big city. This is where they are now finding much of the tablets as well. Nippur is right here where I showed you. That's about 100 miles to the south of modern day Baghdad. This is your Garden of Eden. It's where the story came from, folks. It's the Garden of Eden never existed. It was made up. Now, these structures are still today, as they continue to dig, much like Gobi Tepe, is they still don't understand. We don't fully, we got over 100,000 tablets, and they're finding more. And we got now somnologists. These are professionals that have PhD degrees in the Sumerian culture and language. Folks, the reason why this is so important, it's going to rewrite your whole belief system. The Bible cannot stand up to this record. That's what I'm telling you. No holy book can stand up to this record. This is where they were conceived of. This is where the seeds were brought forth. Because these people are the ones who, this is by by the way, these ziggurats, they were huge. When you think about the construction out of brick. So y'all, I don't know if you see this, but the point is they were so advanced in culture. They created God. They created everything. There was Job, Moses, the Savior. I'm by the time I know, can't you speak straight, Wayne? Actually, I can. But when you read Proverbs here, um, the cosmogony and the cosmology, understanding the deities of how they thought. Folks, every god that has ever existed has been invisible. There's been no God that physically has walked that mankind has ever seen. As I did a video some time ago, if God appeared, what would happen? Well, no one would believe it. You wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. No matter what they did, no matter how they expressed themselves, you wouldn't believe it. Why? It's because from the very beginning, we never believed it. Now, the Sumerians did believe in these gods, but they admitted, it was well known, they were not visible. They were immortal, superhuman, but they had human traits. That's the weird thing. Come to find out, as many astrophysicists are now beginning to see, that the universe is a trioid. Oddly enough, the Sumerians saw it the same way. They brought science and religion. They invented these things, folks. They invented religion. Your religion, my religion, all of our religions. Now, I want to get into here because this is really important. I'll kind of explain some things to you. So, Anu, it was Namu or Kai who gave birth to the heavens and the earth. And An was the male personification of the top. An carried off heaven. We don't know where it went. And Enlil, this character right here, he took over Earth. So Enlil took possession of Earth and took off and carried off heaven. We don't know. But they were at one time, heaven and earth were joined. They were joined together. There was this, we don't know what happened. The Sumerians had a different way of looking at how we see things. There were just some things to them that didn't even occur to ask. They knew that they were clay. They were created from clay. They knew that their lot here was to suffer. They were to please the gods. They were to toil. They were to, unfortunately, have the attributes of the god, and that is to kill your brother, to steal. But they were also lawgivers. Now, here's the interesting thing. Everyone tries to point to the 10 Commandments, and everyone with the Quran and everything with the Vedic. I mean, I can go right down the line. Those are newbies. I mean, we got records now that the law that everyone thinks was the 10 Commandments given by some fake God. These guys had it. Are you ready for this? Nearly 2,000 years before there was ever a hypothetical thing called Moses. Yeah. Now, I'm sure no one expected this. It's like, well, now what do you do? I mean, what? Listen, I read the Sermon of the Mount in here. I mean, come on. So anyway, so you have Mother God. The Son, Utu, is actually kind of below. The moon god is really Sin, Nana, but that's the result because of Enlil. So Enki had to come in, and I am telling you this, and I'll show you because I've been working on this one. I'm not glued to this. Enki, I think, is Lucifer. Yeah, I really do. I'm going to show you anyway. So, oh, by the way, the Anunnaki were created before man and not like man. Man was actually created in what they called Are you ready for this? The creation chamber. And apparently us, no one knows of the gods how it happened, because we came out the way we did, but we were in essence kind of a, well, that was interesting. And from us, they began to make other versions of us. Some had no sexual organs. Some were female but could not have children. They didn't have the reproduction organs. It's really crazy when you read what some of these poems, and let me say this, the pantheon that we have learned, all cultures have learned, were from these characters. And the fact is that there is a structure. Um, the Sumerians believed in demons, but they knew that the demons were a result of the gods, not anything that man had to do. And bottom line, I'll tell you, the Sumerians believed that when they died, they went to what they call the dark world, the nether world, and that their lot was to continue to suffer at the pleasure of the gods. Now, there was a way for you to have salvation. And how you were to do that in the book of Lamentations. Yeah, I just finished reading it last night. I was up late. In the book, and it's actually the first Proverbs and sayings. So in the Lamentations in there, it was recognized that our lot was to suffer, and any relief or fortune that was to come would because you were to develop or create your own God. Now, you would pray in Lamentations, whatever, to your God who would serve as the intermediary between you and the gods. This was called the Savior. Seriously. All right. Then you have the 50. Okay. Now, I want to inject this thought. The Samaritans, I don't know how they did it, but the way they described it was pretty weird. This white hole aspect is something, I throw it in here because it's kind of one of these teasers, but let's get to the point. I wanted to get into this kind of gives you how the God systems, and here's Enki, God of wisdom, God of water. Now, as you will see, Enlil, you ready for this? God of the air. It's strange. Here we go. So as I was putting this together before I came on, and I was waiting for Jeff, sorry that he didn't make it, but there's always next Sunday. I'm looking at this and I went, whoa, wait a minute. All right. And here we have, this is Jehovah. This is Yahweh. This is your Jesus. Baal. That's what Lord is. Anyway, here's the pantheons as you can see. Now, look at here. I put this one in here, Lucifer. Here's Enki and E. God of the waters, God of wisdom, sculpture, architecture, crafts, master of magic and the occult, science, important son of the king of the pantheon, builder of civilizations, great friend and benefactor of man. I don't know about you, but doesn't that just sound? There's something going on here, folks. And I'm curious to see what it is. Now, look at Enlil, god of wind, storms, young warrior, preferred son of the king of the pantheon, powerful vice president of the divine assembly, lord of the bolt or the stormy forces, known for his military skill and great bravery. Wow. I don't know. Hold on one second. So I don't know how many is still here, but let me see. Wow, 161. I'm stopping in. You see, I can actually time travel. I don't know if I'm going backwards or forward. I can actually see myself, then I can go back and see myself doing it. That's strange. So he keeps talking about knowing so much about the Bible. You know, it's not knowing so much about the Bible that you get into heaven, hell. It's going to be full of Bible scholars. Listen, I don't, what I'm trying to say is that the Bible for me doesn't hold, um, if you want to debate me on anything on the Bible, I'll be more than happy to do it. Listen, I am at this journey much like you are. I was tied to that mantra. I mean, I know it, folks. I preached in the prisons. I was a street preacher as well. I know that book, and that book is a deception. I don't know how to tell you that. It's a deception. Now, I know it's hard to hear that, but that book was written, are you ready, folks? Nearly 2,000 years after this was written. So where was that God? You know, I'm just trying to help you question it. Where was the God of Genesis 1? Where was the God of Genesis 3? Where was the God of Genesis 10? Where was the God of Genesis 12? Didn't go by Elohim, didn't go by Yahweh. Where did that God come from? Because if they didn't write about here, how can you say it existed? And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to insult anyone here. I'm trying to have an intelligent discussion outside of the bonds of religious dogma. Because as a historian and as a student, a layman, I thirst after this because the truth is out there somewhere. Now, if these guys, the thing why it's so important is because how they saw themselves to the gods. And they wrote about it at length in their poems. And that's where they don't, there has not been discovered a single tablet that says, this is our religion. No, you don't understand a mind that's 6,000 years old. But I can assure you this, they were every bit like us. Their children, um, the wealthy were typically the scribes. They were the wealthy ones. Now the scribes would be, there was a school, and if you could afford it, you would send your son to school. Daughters were exiled in the Sumerian culture. They had no standing, um, or those that did get into the temples and what have you had very little. They were not taught how to read or write. And if you couldn't afford to send your son to school, then all children, male and female, worked either in the fields, worked in other crafts, and that's just the way life was. Um, I just read their Farmer's Almanac. They, we use today in modern agriculture the same methods these guys came up with. Um, so they knew how to flood the fields. Um, they had, they knew agriculture. They really knew botany. And so if you were a male student and of standing and you went to school, there was what they call basically the headmaster. Then they had the overseers, and then they had the cane masters. When I first read Cain masters, like, what is that? Well, let me just put it this way to you. You screwed up. Um, yeah, the Reed Canes came out. Um, Terrible. First story of bribing a teacher is in here. First story of a lamentations of a father whose son was an ingrate. You know, as he wrote in the tablet, um, he said, "What if I I've given you everything. I never asked you to go into the fields to share in the labor of the field hands. I never asked you to bring in wood. I never asked you any of this. I've sent you to school." And what the son was a juvenile delinquent hanging out, get this, in the boulevards and the plazas in gangs. So you have to dispel, at least for myself, this mythos that somehow or another these were ignorant stone age people. No, history is going to have to be rewritten, or history is going to have to be redated. It's the only thing I can say. So there's their system of, they had the first Congress. Yeah, upper chamber, lower chamber. Although they were ruled by a king, each city had its own god. Therefore, it was very important where you stood and which god. Um, let's see. They had people that made clothes, seamstress. I mean, it was very sophisticated, their laws. Read about a murder case. There was an individual, he worked in the temple, was killed. We knew that one was a mason, another was I think a butcher. And we don't know what the third one was, but they murdered this man. Then they told this man, the man who they murdered, his wife. Well, they actually had police back then, believe it or not. Yeah. So the law caught up with the three, and the trial is ensuing. They had a council of 9, and depending whether you were the plaintiff or the defendant, you would either have an advocate or someone who would be against you. Well, they charged the woman with capital murder. And capital murder back then was a death penalty. Wasn't no question about it. You know, if you got convicted. God, isn't it weird? So apparently there were 2 that stood up on the Council of 9 and began to argue for the woman, and said, well, because they had charged her as an accessory after the fact. That's what it said in the tablet. Folks, this is sophisticated culture here. Well, they argued the case before the other 7 and said, you can't charge her in any way on this. They said she wasn't there. Even if she had been told, she had a good case to be afraid that she would be next. And eventually the 2 I'm trying to think of the word, overcame the objection, and the council agreed to spare her. So that's sophisticated. And to me, I think that that's important. That begins to establish foundation of legitimacy. I mean, look at the Hebrews. They lived in the desert for 40 years. They didn't have this. They were taught the written record, because the reason why they could write it is because these guys. So when I say these statements about people's gods and the Bible and what have you, understand, folks, this history did not exist 100 years ago. It did not exist. And now that it does, it presents real problems, because now all the theologians out there are scrambling, trying to figure out, well, now what do we do now? How do we put our chronology in with now this written record? That's really the apex here. How do you reconcile with this? And if these, in fact, these gods, Enki, Enlil, Hermagasu, the rest of them, Nama, I mean, I just go and start listing them off. Now, they may have been made up in the minds of the Sumerians, and then that begs to lead, if that's the case, and these are nothing but made up deities, because the Sumerians will tell you no one saw these guys. Then where does that lead us? And that's my point to all this. I try to get back to patient zero. And the first thing I had to do was strip off the religious dogma that I was so anchored to. You'll never get free, folks. I'm just telling you, I'm just talking to you. Just won't work. So, well, this has not been your very good Sunday morning. 180 people watching. Enlil, yes. Well, I'm glad people still pray for us. I think that that's important. Boy, there's a lot of people in here. Well, I didn't mean, as they said, to offend anyone this morning. I just want to keep the conversation lively, and I am. But, you know, I can't help but think that if I'm the only one in the same journey, I know I'm not. Your validation that all of us are searching for, and I just want truth. I'm like everybody else. At that moment of death when it comes, it's only going to be you. And when it really hits you that it's about to happen, wow, you know, at least I can go with this. I'm just saying, if something was to happen, from what I have read thus far, and I'm getting more, this has started for me because I want to know these people. I want to know more than anything else how their lives were. I want to know how their temple structure works. And I'll get it in here, and I have two others behind it. Because if I can help you and we can have a discussion, not yelling at each other, not saying calling people other names, but respecting each other, giving each other a hug. I mean, we're all in the same thing. Now, if you're happy and good in your beliefs, spot on, man. High five. I'm not. I'm getting closer because now I got to, here's what's happened. As word got out, and even Professor Kramer brings this out, as more and more of this knowledge got out, first in circles of academia, and then out into the general populace, it served a purpose for many in the general populace. Our friend Zachariah Stitchin. Yes, they do mention about things, but hey, so does this book. I mean, if you really want to get into the whole Planet X and Nibiru, study this book. But this book, which is the Egyptian bronze books, is still a newbie compared to the Sumerian tablets. And I know some people just do not want to accept this, that these tablets have more power over you than what you could ever imagine, because they do. Because you know why? I'll tell you why they have more power over you. Their knowledge. Now, you can choose to do with knowledge what you want, but I would caution, how could you really, if you really are that sure, then read it. Read it for yourself. Find out where your stories of the Bible come from. It's just the fact. Something happened here, folks. This is what I keep saying. Because if the Sumerians believed that we were clay, and we were created from the earth, their poems um, are replete with this thing called the creation chamber. And it's exactly now how I think they depicted it, that tree of life. It appears it was just that, a chamber. Could it be really true? The reason why we can't remember our beginning, because we have no beginning. We were literally created in an artificial machine. It's what the tablets are saying. And they have one story in here when I think it was Enlil and um, Namu got drunk, and Enki, excuse me, it was Enki. It's Enki who did this. Uh, he went in and created another man. The problem was something went wrong in the creation chamber. Even Enki didn't know. He was drunk. And this creature was feeble. Namuk tried to come over, and she tried to put reason back. In other words, she actually took the creature, put it back into the chamber. They couldn't fix it. And so Namu basically cursed Enki for creating such a defective man. She went in, created a race of females, as I said earlier, who did not have any sex organs. She was tired of a lot of the rape taking place among the gods. And that's how man learned. We learned everything from the gods. And it gives a story that they created 6 different species. That doesn't say what happened to them. But so that just really begins to really rack up the brain. Now, if you, I have to say, if the scribe is writing this into a poem, that's a hell of an imagination. I mean, where did the thought come from? That's what I'm asking myself. How did he get that thought? Where did that thing originate from? I mean, it's pretty fantastic what you read. So the story, and I know I've gone over, the story of Enlil when he was heading to Hades, the Samaritan version of hell, which apparently isn't, I don't know, it's a weird place. Now, he created a lot of hellacious creatures. I guess he was pissed. And so on your journey, if that's where you're heading, you're going to cross the river. That's where the Egyptians got the river Styx from. And what you want to make sure is that you have safe passage to get by all of these. There's 3 different guard posts that you have to traverse. And so in one of the stories, this is where Enlil is today, still trying to get out. Now, the good thing is that there are stories of those who have gone there and have traversed back. So I don't know. What does that say? So, well, this has definitely not been your Sunday morning program. I'm reading Don. Wow, Don, I'm reading your comment. Spot on. Wow, there's a lot of y'all in here. So listen, okay, I've been officially 1 hour. So it's like I said, for me, yeah, I'm reading the comments in here. Most of you are on the same journey. And some of y'all are even further ahead than I am. But we're coming, there is an awakening. There is no doubt about this. When I see this and I step back, I am in awe because it tells me something greater than myself is going on. I don't know who's in control. I don't know who's pulling the strings, but I know something about you and me. There's an awakening taking place, and it can be a little bit disconcerting. People are going to look at you a little crazy. They're going to look at you and think you are crazy. But you know what? We love them to our best of our ability. You know, when I think about now, I was listening to Don Henley. We were had to go out yesterday, and so on Sirius, and he was making a live program, a tribute to all of the singers, artists that have passed on this year, and we lost a lot. You know, Tom Petty, can't get over that. Tom Petty is gone. You know, Walter Fagan, just so many. And I think about that journey. I think about it a lot. I've become more aware of the passage of time. I've become more aware of where I will fit into time. Um, there's births coming into our family. And this one particular birth will be in 2018. And that child will live in a world I have no idea. I can't fathom the world that that child was going to grow up in. That child most likely will see and experience the 22nd century, 23rd, actually. That's the things that I think about. And I think, what can I leave this generation yet to come? Because I hope that we as a species will evolve. I don't know. Right now, I see that there's this race. There is those who are awakening. We're trying to catch up. There are those that are ahead of us, you know, the overlords that are creating a reality in their own vision. I don't like that world. Uh, I think that world would be the definition of hell for me. I don't believe in hell, but anyway, people say, well, do you believe in heaven? No, I don't believe in heaven either. And the people are going to say, actually, I had someone say, how can you not believe in heaven? And I asked this person, and I said, well, describe heaven. Tell me what you think heaven is. And she said, well, you know, it's a place of no pain, no suffering. I said, okay. She said, there's no want. I said, okay. And she said, I think that I'll be up worshiping God. And I said, well, okay. Um, First of all, the first things you described is death. I think death would be contained in all that. But then I asked her, I said, so do we have a lobotomy of emotions when you get into heaven? Because it's like the bumper sticker said, Jesus loves you because everybody else thinks you're an asshole. Um, what do we just, I don't know about you, but there's just some people I don't care to be around. What? Does that make me the bad guy here? I mean, there's just some people who are jerks. And I'm trying to think about, and so how do I have a relationship to a person who said died in the 1500s with the same, if you say the same belief system is still the same? I contend it's not. But anyway, how do you relate to that? How would they relate to me? And this is where I could never figure out. So how does all this work? You know, do we suddenly get into a big ballroom and say, hey, how you doing? My name is Wayne Steiger. I was born in 1955. How you doing? When were you born? Oh, that really sucked. What happened? I don't know. Now, yes, I believe that there is life after this. I don't think that we ever stop living. I really don't. And whether we're under the spell of Enki, because as the Pantheon reads, things got weird, folks. Things got weird with these gods. Um, it's led me to believe that I don't think they ever left. I swear, I am coming to the conclusion they're still here. They've just taken on different personifications. And that's pretty scary when you think about it, that nothing has changed, because as the sign says behind me, 6,000 years, almost no changes in mankind, in our social, our cultural, our legal, our habits, virtually no change. 6,500 years we go back. No cultural change. And you could say, well, Wayne, look at our technology. No, you're relying on machines. What I am saying to you as a species, there's been virtually no cultural changes. Why? Am I the only one who thinks about this? Why no changes? And my wife pointed out, she said, the record is becoming very clear. We have regressed. All right, I'm going to throw something out and may end this program on this. What if there's something breaking down in us? What if there is something collapsing on a cellular level that we don't have any understanding? Our science hasn't gotten there yet. Is that why we're seeing more rampant diseases, that these bodies are becoming more susceptible to attacks? I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing this thing out here because a chamber, I don't like the sound of that. But if that's what the tablets are translating out, and listen, I can only go by what these cats are writing. It's taken them decades. Sometimes they're working with just fragments, but I don't like that term chamber. Wow. Is that where the genetic code started going wrong? Now, you can go back in my video series on the bloodline invaders. That's what I was trying to tell everyone. Something's gone wrong on a genetic level. This just kind of points to more and more of that. So anyway, all right, that's Sunday morning. All right, I'm going to go get another cup of coffee. I just want to say thank you to every one of you. I appreciate the opportunity to be invited into your homes. Thank you for allowing me the honor. Thank you for your hospitality. I just appreciate you. And I know I say some things that sometimes is like fingernails on the chalkboard, but that's for my benefit as well, not just your own. Because, some of these conclusions that you start coming to, it's like, man, what was the saying? Be careful for what you wish for. I don't know. All right, folks. Appreciate every one of you. Big hug. Thank you all. Shake the hand. Be kind to someone today that they don't know you did an act of kindness. And let's just see where the rest of this journey goes. It's been interesting so far. All right, folks. We'll talk soon.